This is Cynthia Anders, and we are back with Living It Up After 50, and we are getting ready to chat with one of my favorite people on the planet, Hasani Pettiford. Welcome, Hasani, to the show.
It is an honor, as always, to be on your show.
You have good stuff going on. So tell me what's happening in the world of Hasani Pettiford.
You know what? It's just a whirlwind. Sometimes it's hard to keep up. I don't even remember from day to day. But ultimately, still making an impact on people's lives, coaching and counseling, multiple couples from around the country and now from around the world. We've gotten requests from, Canada, the Caribbean, London. And so it's exciting to be able to not only speak through technology, but to travel and do conferences and retreats and just make an impact. And regardless of religion, race, ethnicity, culture, tradition, or creed, it seems as though everyone's going through the same issues and they're looking for help. And so I'm glad that we have something to share in terms of our experience and in terms of our knowledge base that will really make a difference in the lives of others.
I think that's fantastic, and that's why you are here today. Last month, we did a whole series on dating. We talked about dating. But one thing we haven't talked a lot about, which we're going to, is marriage. When I asked you what you wanted to talk about, you said infidelity. Oh, my God. I was like, whew.
And, so many marriages are being affected by it. It's interesting. Upwards of 50% of all marriages wind up ending in divorce, which means that you have approximately 50% who stay together. But the question becomes, what does that mean, staying together? Does that automatically represent success? Certainly not, because 30% of those wind up experiencing emotional disconnection over the course of time, which leads to an emotional divorce or a social divorce. And so when you add up the 50% who are legally divorced and the other 30% who are emotionally and socially divorced, that's 80% of all marriages. So only 20% are actually happy and healthy and have something, worth keeping. And so the question becomes, do you want to be an 80%er or do you want to be a 20%er? And we're committed to being 20%ers and helping other couples who have been through struggles and tribulations and trials to become 20%ers as well.
Nice. And eventually you will raise that 20% to 30% to 40%.
Exactly. And so what we're finding is that one of the biggest challenges that people suffer from is infidelity. And infidelity, rears its ugly head in a multitude of ways. It could be physical or sexual, but it can also be emotional. And we're seeing that there's a lot of opportunity out there, more so than ever before. We saw that historically, when women entered into the workforce years and years and years ago, obviously there was more opportunity because you have men and women in the same working environment, the same social space. Now with social media and now with technology and the ability of texting and mobile devices, it's becoming even more of an alarming concern because you can have your own life, have your own conversations unbeknownst to your partner, and that's how emotional, affairs take place that can often lead to something physical and sexual.
But accountability is really, really important when it comes to the social media piece, right?
It means everything. And, it all comes down to honesty, and it all comes down to trustworthiness. And what happens is, the more I get into this space, really dealing with so many couples, because I would say that 98% of the couples who come to me are affected by infidelity, which has forced me to kind of shift gears and to really study that out and see what are the causes, what are the reasons, what are the motivations, what are the gaping holes that exist in a relationship that cause these things to happen. And so one thing I've learned is that we, from the time of our youth, have been trained and indoctrinated and groomed to be dishonest in our communication, particularly in the area of think about the young child who the parent has an expectation of, how they need to handle themselves sexually. I was born and raised in the church, so I was taught obey God and honor your body and wait till you get married to have sex. And if that is the belief, and if that's the expectation, but yet and still I have a desire to explore, I'm going to be dishonest with my parents in the area of my own sexuality. I may not communicate openly and honestly about what I feel and about what I'm doing. So if I've been doing that from the time that I've been a child, every year that I grow older and enter into my, maturity, I have a habit that is already fixed in me that I carry out into my adult relationships. So now when two consenting adults get married and now they're permissible to engage in sex with one another, there's still that stigma, that cloud, that area of deception, that dishonesty that's a part of their normal communication and interaction where sexuality is concerned. And deceit and dishonesty and lies and trickery is a major part of this entire process.
So what do you do? How do you engage folks to have that, to first of all, to be honest and with themselves enough to say, I want to be honest with my partner about where I am sexually?
Well, that's the challenge. So what happens is I always encourage couples to go through what is called a disclosure process, where you disclose to your partner what has happened. Oftentimes, very, very few times do people voluntarily, share this information. A lot of times they're identified, okay? And then once they're discovered, then we enter into discovery or full disclosure. That becomes a very challenging thing because you can't go from dishonest to honest, from deception and secrecy to total transparency as easy as it is to flip a switch. Because if you've been doing this for so long, why all of a sudden would you open up and share? And then there's reasons why people find it very difficult to tell the truth. Either A, they're lying or deceiving because they want to protect their partner from their own hurt feelings, possibly, because if I tell you the truth, it's going to hurt you. If I tell you the truth, you're not going to like it. You're not going to feel good about it. The other reason why there's lies and deception when it comes to this disclosure process is that I'm trying to protect myself, or I'm trying to avoid the trouble or the consequence that may come if I share these details. And then number 3, people are dishonest because they're just pathological liars, right? So usually in this scenario, they're either in the first or the second category. So there's a long struggle that couples go through to get to the point of total transparency.
Wow. It's so interesting. So having the conversation, so I guess I would ask, before marriage or after marriage, which is the perfect scenario?
To do what? To talk, to have an open and honest? How about hi, my name is, from the dating season. You remember we talked about the 4 seasons of a successful relationship, the dating season, committed courtship, engagement, and then marriage. So the reality is there are certain things that you're just not going to talk about, discuss, or may not be relevant when you're first dating. But when you make a decision to enter into a committed relationship and you're taking it to the next level, more of you should come out. You should be open and honest about more of your history, more of your thoughts, your feelings, your desires. And we've talked about this before, I think, that the average single engages in sex between the 3rd date and the 6th week. So we have no problem becoming physically naked, but we have a major problem becoming emotionally and intellectually naked. And so a lot of times we enter into marriage with secrets. We enter into marriage with undisclosed information that we don't think will be helpful, and we carry these things. And so we wear masks, right? We put on false faces. We have disguises, and we're hiding ourselves from the person that we should have the most intimate relationship with on the planet Earth. And so when you are drenched in that, and that is your form of communication, and that is the way you interact with your spouse, how can you all of a sudden be completely transparent when you are not even wired that way anymore, because you have a habit which has created a pattern of deception?
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty powerful. So, okay. So you had me at hello. Hello, my name is Cynthia. This is who I am.
A lot of that information comes out over time. Like I said, you're not just, identifying all your faults, your flaws, your issues, your weaknesses, your challenges on date one. A lot of those things are discovered, and a lot of those things, think about it, we are like onions, and we have several layers. Yes. And we're constantly pulling back layers, and every layer you pull back represents a deeper level of intimacy. And the reality is, I don't care if you've been together for 2 years or 20 years. Most of us only reach the initial stages of intimacy. There's 7 levels. Most of us don't even get to the 3rd and 4th level, no matter how long we've been together. So it's a skill, in essence, that you have to begin to develop and implement into your marriage.
So what I was asking you was, how do you facilitate that conversation? How does, let's say, a woman facilitate that conversation with her husband to want to go deeper, but yet when we say, I want to talk, that's a scary topic right there.
Okay,
so how do we start that conversation with her?
The only way to get your partner, whether male or female, to truly open up and begin to peel back those layers is to establish an upfront agreement. The thing is, if telling you means I may lose you, I'm not going to tell you, and it doesn't matter what you try to get me to say, it's just not going to happen. I'm taking it to the grave. And so sometimes they need a reassurance that, listen, whether it's, I don't know, I mean, you should be truthful. But if you have a desire to work on the marriage and to restore it, you've got to overcompensate in trying to convince them that, listen, I want to know the truth. I'm committed to you. I'm committed to our marriage. I know, that there was infidelity, but these truths will help me to begin to heal. See, it's not just about knowing gory details for the sake of now just knowing, but it's a part of the healing process. Just particular analogy. Mm-hmm. Have you, Cynthia, ever put together a puzzle before?
Yes.
Okay. If you put together a puzzle, 9 times out of 10, the cover of the puzzle box has the image of the puzzle that you are to put together. Now, imagine if the puzzle had 1,000 pieces, but you were given the disadvantage of, number one, not seeing what the cover of the puzzle looks like, so you have no idea what the image of the puzzle is supposed to create, and you only have 400 pieces, and you're expected to put this puzzle together. Well, you're missing information. Mm-hmm. And so without that information, it is hard for you to understand. It is hard for you to heal. It is hard for you to forgive. It's hard for you to move on. And the person who's been involved in the affair has all of the pieces of the puzzle, has the entire big picture, and they're expecting their partner to just get over it and move on without full understanding. And so it is the hurt partner's responsibility to ensure the unfaithful partner that they are committed, that they want to work it out. And I'm not going anywhere, but I just need to know. So he needs to motivate that partner by doing what? By creating a safe environment. Oftentimes during the disclosure process, it is the most volatile time in the relationship where you're going from 0 to 100 in 2.3 seconds flat. Could you imagine the emotion that's involved in the discovery process of when and where and how many times and in what ways? That can be very hurtful and harmful, not only to the receiver of the information, but to the giver of the information. So it's a very sensitive time. So by her or him, whoever it may be, the hurt partner, creating a safe environment where they're not penalizing their partner, they're not jumping down their throats, they're not, minimizing what it is that they say, as we often do in normal conversations with one another, he or she will begin to open up slowly but surely. And so it's not a one-time conversation. There may be hundreds of conversations that may need to take place over a period of time before the hurt partner finally gets it, finally understands it, and can then move on.
You know what? I find it very fascinating that you put it in that framework, because I think a lot of women, I know a lot of my friends and folks that I know that have been through this, look at it the opposite, that the partner who had engaged in the extramarital affair is the one that needs to create that safe environment for the hurt person. And instead of the opposite. I think it's great to hear you say, okay, we're going to create this environment that I'm going to make it safe for you to tell me the truth, as opposed to the opposite, that other person. I mean, I know it's a two-way street, but I don't think we ever looked at it, or many of us have ever looked at it that way, to say, I want to create this so that you can be honest with me, so that the communication can open up and we can work through this.
Think about it like this.
That's fascinating.
If every time I come in your presence, you swing at me and I'm forced to flinch or to defend myself, the next time I come in the room, my guard is up. The next time I come in the room, I'm tiptoeing. Yes. The next time I come in the room, I'm real careful about how I approach you, because what? You may swing at me. So take that physical swing and apply it to a verbal swing within the context of a conversation. And so if I'm coming at you, tell me the truth, I want to know now, it doesn't make sense. If you're doing that, you're not motivating that partner to talk. You're not. And just as the hurt partner has a responsibility of creating an environment of safety, the unfaithful partner has even greater responsibility of being responsible in their honesty. Because typically when we tell the truth, a lot of times it's drenched in inappropriateness in terms of how we deliver it. Oh, you want to know the truth? I'm going to tell you the truth. And oftentimes it's hard, it's mean, it's inappropriate. And so you really have to be careful in terms of your delivery so it can somewhat be palatable to the receiver of the information, so that you both are doing things that are productive to move the conversation forward.
Pretty powerful. Can we back up just a little bit? Could you give us a definition? Because I think a lot of people look at that word infidelity and they think it only means to have sexual intercourse with someone else. And you were talking about emotional infidelity and such. So can you just kind of break down that a little bit more for us as far as the definition of infidelity?
I'll break it down by giving you the 4 classes of an affair. So the first class of an affair is what we call the one-night stand. That's when I just have one sexual experience with someone. That's all it was sex. I had a burning desire. I fulfilled it. Never talk again, never see that person again, or even if I do, it was a one-night thing. It could represent I'm going on a business trip. I met someone from across town, whatever the case may be, right? Those are probably the easiest to heal from, because that's all it was a one-time occurrence. The second class of an affair is what we call emotional entanglements. That is when a relationship has formed, interactions, communications. And the reality is communication is the foundation of all intimacy. And so the more we talk, the more we emotionally connect, we find things that we have in common. So now it becomes a heart issue. And once it's a heart issue, the body normally follows. See, infidelity doesn't start in the bedroom. It ends in the bedroom. You transition into that in this type of friendship relationship. So I'm sure you've heard the term, oh, that's my work spouse. Yeah, this is the person I connect with at work because I spend 8 hours of my day with this particular person. So I'm forming relationships that may not be appropriate. And so that is probably one of the hardest ones to kind of heal from, because it's not just about stopping the physical act of sex, but now if I'm emotionally caught up with you, I'm thinking about you, I'm dreaming about you, the detachment process is a very difficult one, challenging one, and long one if certain things aren't put in place. Does that make sense? Emotional entanglement. Then you have the third class of an affair, which is sexual compulsion. This is the individual who's had multiple accounts of infidelity, multiple women. There's a sexual urge, something beyond their control. You know, they have to have it several times a day, several different ways, all the variety. Maybe they were abused in their childhood, and the effect of that is manifesting into, you know, compulsive activities with other women or other men outside of your marriage. So that's another challenge. That's a different process to heal from. So the way you get over emotional infidelity is completely different than the way that you recover from sexual compulsion. Then the fourth and very common one is what we call the open-ended relationship. This is where there are issues in the relationship, problems, things that we've talked about again and again and again, and things are not being resolved. There's a void, there's an emptiness, there's a need that I have that's not being fulfilled. And because it's not being fulfilled by you, because now we're emotionally disconnected, I will naturally connect myself to someone else who can fill that void. And so that's why it's so important that during the discovery process, we begin to understand the why of the affair. The why is so critically important because once we've discovered the why represents the motive. The why represents the intent. The why represents the stimulus that led to the affair. And once we've discovered that, then we can zone in on trying to rectify and correct certain things that have caused the affair to take place.
And many times we don't look at the why. We just look at the what happened and not the why as to what led up to this happening.
Exactly. And one of the challenges that, and one of the things that kind of limits the hurt partner in this whole process is that during the initial phase, there's a lot of blame that's being passed. Either the hurt partner will blame his or herself, and now we're dealing with, well, maybe I'm not good enough, or maybe I'm not attractive enough, or maybe I didn't give him enough sex, and so she or he begins to question their own sexuality and appearance and ability to serve their partner. Then there's the blame that you give your partner, and we make the partner who was unfaithful the sum total of why it happened. Yes, he or she may be the one who did it, but by saying that him and of himself or of herself are the only reason why infidelity occurred is misleading, because that means that there weren't other issues that were existing in the relationship that you may have to acknowledge. Or we blame the affair partner, right? The affair partner is completely wrong. You've seen this played out in TV and in movies all the time. If a partner understands that her partner is cheating with somebody else, what does she do? She jumps on the affair partner and will beat that person down and bypass the unfaithful partner who's standing right next to them. The hurt, more hurt comes from the one you know, not the one you don't know. And so when you can get past the blame game and really begin to dig a little deeper and begin to understand the reasons for affairs, how common affairs are, and what type of climate existed in the relationship prior to the affair, it helps you begin to put the pieces together and begin to properly heal. And then from that point, you can protect your marriage.
I was talking to a friend last night, and we were talking about some of the same thing, right? And why is it that there are many women, we want to talk to that. We want to call that woman that our man has had an affair with. We want to have that conversation when that is, what do you think about that? Do you think that's a healthy thing, or why do we do that?
Well, we do that because we can't get the truth from our unfaithful partner. They won't say anything. They're protecting the affair partner. And by protecting the affair partner, they're protecting themselves. And so some of us have a philosophy that says he or she doesn't need to know everything. Not everything needs to be shared. And so, I believe in the policy of radical honesty, where you share everything. Even if something is painful, you have to share it in a way that kind of limits the pain. But it's important because if you don't have true transparency, now you have a wedge or a block. And so there have been many couples that I have coached and counseled where that conversation did take place, and sometimes it's the affair partner calling the spouse. Listen, I just want to let you know that your husband or your wife is no good, and these are the times and these are the places. I question, what is the motive in that? Obviously, they're doing it to wreck the home and to destroy the situation. But we have seen that certain partners have reached out to that affair partner to get the answer that they couldn't get from their own spouse. And sometimes it's you find out way more than some people say. You find out way more than you want to know, but sometimes what you're saying, it's best to know everything as opposed to just part of it, because you will find it out eventually down the road. Right, and by everything, let me bring clarity. I don't think it is necessarily healthy to know positions and, certain things people can't handle and may not be wise to know, or if there are those people who are wired to have to know, Maybe they want to know because they want to figure out what they need to do that they did not do, or whatever the case may be. People have different motivations. But sometimes what happens is when you don't know, it leads to how do you call this thing? Where your mind is constantly racing and you're thinking and thinking and thinking, and now your imagination is running and creating scenarios that may be way worse than what actually happened. That's why it's important to know certain things, so at least you know the facts of the case so your imagination won't run. So what we enter into is obsessive thinking, obsessively thinking about the situation. And the reality is, once you discover what happened, now you've entered into emotional volatility, right? The emotional roller coaster. You're up, you're down. 1 minute you're crying, 1 minute you're depressed, 1 minute you're enraged, 1 minute you want to work on it, 1 minute you're sorrowful, 1 minute you want to forgive. And all of these emotions that are going up and down and back and forth are what? Created by the thought process. You're constantly obsessively thinking about it. You can control a person's emotions by the thoughts that you put in their head. And if they meditate upon those thoughts long enough, it will impact their emotional state.
So how do you get past this? What are the things that you do to work on the healing and forgiveness side when you have all of these things in your head and you're playing back scenarios that you've been told? What are the steps that you take to heal?
Well, the first thing you need to do is go through the full discovery process, disclosure process, where all the truth comes out. Now, once the truth comes out, it's important to then begin to assess your relationship, because most marriages fall into one of three general patterns. And all of these patterns, unfortunately, lead to or create the temptation for infidelity. I'll quickly go through them. One of the patterns is what we call the windshield wipers. Just think about the windshield wipers on the car. They move from left to right in a sequence, right? They never touch. There's a distance between them. And so a lot of times we operate that way. We're living in a marriage, and from the outside looking in, we're moving, we're functioning, things look good, but the closer you get, wait a minute, we're not connected physically, we're not connected emotionally, because there is this distance between us like windshield wipers. And even though we're moving in the same direction and it seems that we have a flow, think about it. The only time that a windshield wiper touches the other is if it's broken and tips over. And so many of us function in this emotional disconnection for so long. And if I'm emotionally disconnected to you, it's easy for anyone else to slip in. So kind of reworking or rewiring the nature of your relationship to make things different so that pattern doesn't exist. Pattern number 2 is what we call the dial tones. The dial tones. When you pick up a phone, what do you hear? A dial tone. Beep. It's the same way every single time. Is predictable. You know what it's going to sound like before you pick it up. This represents predictability. This represents monotony. This represents boredom. And when I'm bored and there's no more excitement and there's nothing to us but just bills and babies and responsibilities and jobs, there's nothing between us. There's no passion. There's no love. It's easy to have a desire for those things that are now missing, and you find it in other people. Pattern number 3 is what we call the child-centered marriage. Most of us fall into this. So when we get married, we are husband and wife. And as soon as we have that first child, we take off mommy hat and daddy hat. We husband and wife hat and put on mommy hat and daddy hat. And now it's all about the child.
Okay.
All the resources go to the child. The money goes to the child. The time goes to the child. The affection goes to the child. And so the child takes some time and resources and affection that we would naturally give one another. And because we're wearing these hats for so long, to the time that child becomes 18 and moves out, once he or she does, what do we have between us? Nothing. We're just two individuals raising a child, and now we're strangers to one another and have to start that reconnection. But wait a minute, while I was a mother and while I was a full-time father, I still needed a connection, and I couldn't get it from my partner, so I get it from somebody else. So once you begin to identify your marriage pattern, you can begin to make changes to correct it. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And so so the honesty starts when you have to look at yourselves and identify what's going on. instead of just thinking eventually it's going to get better without doing the work.
Correct. That's absolutely true. Now, another thing you have to do is you have to begin to enter into the forgiveness process. So once we've discovered everything, once I've shared everything and I've been apologetic and not dismissive, I haven't minimized, I haven't played mind games and make you feel as if you're crazy or if you're wrong. I've been open, I've been honest, I've been repentive, I've been remorseful. We get into the forgiveness phase.
Yeah.
Now, in order to forgive, you have to be clear what you're forgiving the person for. A part of the forgiveness process is the repentance process. Repentance means completely changing lanes, turning around, going in an opposite direction, no longer doing what was once done. So both parties have a role to play in this. A part of the forgiveness is building trust. Now, that's the huge piece. Okay, fine, I forgive you. Fine, you're not doing it anymore. Fine, we've moved on. But do I trust you? And this is where the challenge comes, because now I have to overcompensate and live a life of transparency. If you want to know where I am all hours of the day, you have the right to know that. If you want access to my phone, which I've kept on lock and key, if you want access to my email and my social media devices because it's been on lock and key, you should do that, because if I'm still holding technology and devices separate from you, then that means that there's still secrecy.
Yes.
And if there's secrecy, then I can no longer trust what it is that you say or what you do. So this is what I mean by becoming emotionally and intellectually naked with your partner, where you two become one. And when you can begin to do that, over the course of time, you can begin to build or rebuild the trust that was lost.
That's pretty important. I know I see a lot of folks on Facebook, couples, who both have the same Facebook account, so that one, if one sees one, the other they see the same thing, they operate the same way. So there's, in just the fact that everyone else knows that you're talking to the both of them. And I think that's good for folks who are the married folks, but also the folks who are out there not married and seeing folks doing the thing. Anyway, keep going. Trust is huge. Trust is huge.
Without a doubt. And when these things are put in place, you have to understand that it generally takes 2 years from the time of disclosure for the hurt partner to completely heal from the affair. Now, that is if they're doing everything they're supposed to do. That is if they're getting help. They're going to counseling. They're reading books. They're developing a relationship with God. They've changed their patterns. They're not resetting the clock because it was another act of infidelity. That's when everything is going the right way. For those that do not partake in this type of process, some never heal. And if they do, it takes a lot longer than just 2 years. And so the seed of resentment and fear and doubt, insecurity, mistrust lies, not dormant, but lies within the heart of the hurt partner. And then the unfaithful partner who hasn't changed their ways continues to do what they've always done. So when it comes to healing from an affair, there are 3 things that need to take place. There needs to be what we call marriage recovery or relationship recovery, number 1. Then there's the individual personal recovery. And the recovery process for a man is different. The recovery process for the hurt partner is different than the recovery process for the unfaithful partner. So the hurt partner needs to go through a healing process. They need to build up their self-esteem, understand their self-worth, find their purpose, make certain relational correctives, develop that relationship with their God, control their mind and their emotions, and move forward. The unfaithful partner needs to make internal correctives. They need to put, or he needs to put boundaries and borders, in their life to govern them accordingly. They have to no longer engage in what we call close call relationships with members of the opposite sex. There have got to be rules and rituals that are established within that marriage that protects the unfaithful partner from being unfaithful again. So you can't continue to have the same conversations and the same interactions the way you always had and expect not to cheat just because you made a decision not to do so. It's like a crack addict that goes back to crack house who makes a decision, I'm not going to smoke. That's crazy. You've got to remove yourself from that environment until that taste and that desire and temptation is no longer in you. And so there's a process. There's a process we take couples through. And it's a long one. It's a journey. You know, you can't race to the final destination and just hope that it will go away and sweep it up under the carpet. No, you have to deal with this, and it's something that's going to be a season of your relationship that you're going to have to endure, but you have to remain consistent, you have to remain steadfast and committed to the process.
And that commitment is very important because some folks will just throw in the towel as soon as this happens. It's like, I'm done, it's over, there's no working through. And but being committed is a process in itself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is just a quick snapshot. It goes a lot deeper than this, but you can't cover everything within an hour conversation on a phenomenal radio show. It takes a whole lot more. But it should give people who are going through it, because I know there's so many listeners on this phone or listening to the show right now that have experienced this and haven't gone through the proper process. And they're depriving themselves of the life that they can live. They're depriving themselves. And so sometimes, even though the future is bleak, even though you may fear the process of digging deep and going, down this path, at the end of the day, we've seen countless couples who have developed stronger relationships after the affair than they ever had prior to the affair ever occurring. And so I don't believe that if it's happening, the relationship is doomed. There's just too many cases, too many couples that I've worked with that have now wonderful, phenomenal relationships because they were willing to be bold enough, brave enough, audacious enough to do what needed to be done to save their marriage.
How wonderful! That's amazing, and that's wonderful because just the statistics that you shared with us, a lot of things could be saved if we just put forth the effort, to work through the stuff, and a lot of it I think is probably much more painful to go through, but there's on the other end is much more rewarding. So let's tell our listeners about Couples Academy and what you and Danielle are doing, actually how they can contact you and what Couples Academy is all about.
Couples Academy is a relationship-based learning institute committed to helping couples by placing them on the path to fulfillment. And so my wife and I, who are co-founders of the organization, in fact, the song that you played earlier, she was the vocals in the background. She helped put that song together.
Oh, was she?
She was. But we're committed to doing everything that we can do for couples, which would include marriage intensives. Matter of fact, it's so interesting. I'm flying to Canada next week, and a couple from Toronto who's experienced multiple counts of infidelity is flying me in to do a 3-day intensive privately with just them, because this is their last chance. If this doesn't work, then the future for them really looks bleak. And so we're now getting called to just do different things all over the place. So whether it be private intensives, our retreats, our cruises, our podcasts, our teleconference calls, our coaching, we're just committed to really helping couples. And in that, it means that we have to be committed to having a healthy relationship ourselves. We're in the process of seeking a marriage mentor. We need a covering. We want to help other people, but we need to protect our marriage, and that's important no matter who you are, no matter how much you know. I remember hearing somebody say recently that the 4 words, the most dangerous 4 words that you could ever put together would be, I already know that. And many of us are know-it-alls. We know everything. But the question is, are you living that? That's the key. So when you ask the question, who do you listen to? Don't just listen to people who have good information and are textbook in their response, but listen to people who have phenomenal relationships that you can glean from, and it's been tried, tested, and proven. You see the love. You see the passion. You see the connection. You see them living the message that they preach, and that's what we try to do.
Yes. I am very honored. I am very honored, I'll use that word, that you have shared this time with us, and every time you come on, because I know that the work that you're doing around the world, the articles that you are writing, the television appearances that you make regularly, that you would take the time to chat with us and share this information with us. And I'm hoping that one day we'll have you out here in the Pacific Northwest, you and Danielle. We're working on something now, and hopefully in the next 12 months it will come to fruition. That
now you know I would
help us with
that.
our relationship movement. Huh?
I would absolutely love that.